Four core motivations CIA exploit Rice. I guess that Rice is like the four motivations, but this is by Everyday Spy podcast. I'm gonna like their video, like my video, support your boy. Let's see what they're talking about with the four core motivations.
There are four core motivations that CIA teaches us to look for in every human asset, right? And we use the moniker, the acronym RICE to describe those four motivations, right? R stands for reward, I stands for ideology, C stands for coercion, and E stands for ego. So you've got reward, ideology, coercion, and ego. They make the acronym RICE. These four are fairly obvious to understand, right? A reward is anything that makes somebody work for you, whether it's money or whether it's praise or whether it's a free cruise, whatever it might be. Right. Ideology, I for ideology, is what people believe in. C is coercion. Coercion is when you force somebody through blackmail or through guilt or through debt, whatever it might be. And then E stands for ego. And ego is the one that I find people most misunderstand. Ego is not egotistical people. Ego is about doing things a certain way because you want to be perceived a certain way, right? So these four motivations.
So it's not about manipulating people's ego, but rather about manipulating your ego in order to appear in a certain way, ego being your character. So instead of trying to manipulate people's ego and stroke their ego, they're talking about how you can behave in a certain way and change your character to appear a certain kind of way in that person's eyes. Cool.
Basically define all a certain way, right? So these four motivations basically define all human behavior everywhere at all times. RICE.
Yep.
When we talk about the father of the nuclear missile, the father of the space program, right?
For ego, I think they also mean like how people also put on characters to be perceived in a certain way too. Not just you, but other people as well.
Von Braun. He was not ideologically driven.
No, he wasn't. He was barely paying attention to politics.
He believed the space program, right? Werner von Braun. He was not ideologically driven.
No, he wasn't. He was barely paying attention to politics.
He belonged to the Nazi Party.
Right.
But not because he was a Nazi.
No, it's because he was German and he lived there, and that's what you did. So he actually, when Hitler took power in 1933, he was in his PhD program, and then the next year we finished his dissertation, and immediately the military took it. The military was like, "This is important for the
homeland, the fatherland,
right, for the homeland." And he was like, "Sure." He's like, "You're going to fund me? Great. I'm going to build rockets." And so for him, he was like, I was just being a German citizen.
Yeah.
And then even when there's stories where the German rockets were built by prisoners. They say that he had a tour by the SS of the factory where the rockets were being built, and there's all this, there's this speculation of, did he really know what was going on? Did he know and he just justified it some way? Did he care? But he wasn't ideologically driven, so it makes sense that for him, it was a little bit easier. I mean, maybe he felt bad about it, but it was a little bit easier for him to look the other way because his dream was coming true. His rocket was being built.
Right.
Yeah.
So here you have a guy who is essentially just a rocket nerd.
A giant rocket nerd. So great.
And the fastest path to him getting funding to develop the rockets he wanted to develop, where he lived at the time, which was Germany, was essentially military funding by the Nazi Party in 1935.
Right. What else was he going to do?
And if he were to ideologically stand up and say, "I do not agree with you,"
he would have helped build the rocket with the other prisoners. I mean, honestly, or maybe those rockets never would have been built because,
or maybe not. Who knows? But I think you're right, right?
Yeah.
Because one thing that we know about Nazi Germany is. You were either a compliant asset or you were a forced labor asset.
So it's possible that even though his own personal motivation would have been reward and ego, it's possible that had he ideologically resisted, they would have just used coercion.
Oh, there you go. Way to bring it all together.
There you go.
That's true. That's true.
Okay, word.
But instead, what we find with Werner von Braun is that he was ego-driven.
Right.
And this, I think, is really important for us to understand. If you want to understand what drives people, you can't just assume that people are driven by blind ideology.
Right.
You can't assume that people are driven by money and greed. And it's funny because those are the two things, those are two of the strongest motivations out there.
Yeah.
But they're also two of the most over-assigned,
Yeah, because would it money and greed? I think money would just be a part of reward. You feel me? And so would greed, reward would be part of reward. It could also be part. It could also be a part of ego, like you want to portray yourself a certain kind of way. You feel me? What's the C? Coercion? Nah, I don't see that. Ideology? No, not as. I think yeah, greed, money and greed would just be reward. You feel me? That's what I would think. Because like you get rewarded from having money, you get rewarded for being greedy and obtaining so many things.
generalized motivations out there. People see a wealthy business person
Yeah.
and they accuse that wealthy businessman of being greedy and money driven. They may
And
not
reward
be.
driven.
They may be driven by something completely
Like for example, with me, I'm very, especially with I'll just say with my YouTube. With my YouTube, it's I'd say mainly ideological. You feel me? But also reward for a fact. You feel me? Niggas definitely do want to make income off YouTube at some point. I'm very close to getting paid by YouTube. I only need 500 more watch hours. You feel me? I do have that incentive. But it's more about my ideologies and the fact that I want to just put out content that makes people more aware of several different topics. Like these reaction videos, just be cool to talk over and stuff like that. You feel me? Just like watch them, just to spam out content and stuff like that. But like my teaching videos, I really that's more ideologically based. You feel me? Because I was doing that shit before even trying to make money off YouTube. You feel me? But now that I see I actually really can do that. Like before, I didn't think I was going to get to a point where I might make bread off YouTube. I didn't think that was going to really happen like that. You feel me? But once I saw it was possible, I'm like, oh shit. Might as well do this shit, and now I'm doing that shit. You feel me? So I am driven by the reward of being paid by YouTube, also. But it's more about my ideology and my beliefs, and feeling like my beliefs are important to be shared.
different, like ego or like ideology. People look at a religious leader and they just assume that religious leader is blindly focused on religion. They may not be. They may be driven forward by money and
Yeah.
ego. They may be
Yeah.
coerced. They may
Facts.
not have an option.
Facts, nah. They could just want to seem like it could be ego wanting to seem like a holy person, and also reward. They just want the money for that. Facts. That's facts.
Right.
Right? We were just talking to somebody recently about the growing sense of like anti-China-ism inside the United States.
Yeah.
And I forget what they said specifically, but it was something like, is it safe to just assume that every Chinese person in America is a spy? And we're like, no, you
Yeah.
can't just assume that every Chinese person in America is a spy.
That'd
You
be
cannot
crazy,
assume that.
though. That'd be
But
crazy,
you
though.
also can't assume that just because someone has Chinese ethnicity, they are being left alone by the government of China.
Right.
Right. Instead, you have to land somewhere in between.
Right.
Because
Well,
every
yeah.
every person who has Chinese, every
I
American.
mean, I would think that, right? I hope niggas don't think in those crazy ass absolutes about Chinese people. That'd be kind of wild.
With Chinese ethnicity is absolutely on the radar of the Chinese.
Right.
So you have to see it for what it really is, without going so far as to assume that they're all ideologically communist.
Right. And I think, something that maybe.
Oh, I
don't know.
guess maybe that's why they think that, because no, still though, no. I guess because they think like, oh, like Chinese, like China, they're communists, so these Chinese niggas must be communist. But nah.
People understand that about espionage is, espionage is a business of relationships, right? Relationships and transactions within those relationships. But a big part of espionage is getting to know who you are developing or who you are trying to get information from. So in espionage, there is no judging a book by its cover.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
Well,
So-
yeah.
You can, but you have to be willing to be very wrong.
Yeah. It's a super risky game if you're going to play it that way. So, espionage, really the reason that Rice exists is because you have to get to know the other person, right? The person who's your target, and you have to be able to understand them well enough to understand what their motivations are, any cultural things that come into play, and culture completely comes into play. So there's all these things you have to learn about the other person before you can, and to make an assessment before you can approach them, before you can use them, before you can work with them.
Yeah.
Right.
So fast forward now to when the Allied powers are able to capture Werner von Braun
Right.
and make him a POW and make his team a group of POWs
Right.
when they take the actual facility where the Germans have created the V2 rocket and where they've expanded their rocket science and industry. The Americans, the Allied powers, come in and take him away, and they relocate him to the United States. Now here is a rocket nerd turned Nazi in order to secure funding to continue playing with his rockets.
Right.
That is a person driven on ego and reward, right?
Right.
I want to play with rockets.
Right.
Just let me play with rockets. So what do the Allies do?
So they say, we'll fund you to build some rockets.
We'll fund you to build rockets for us now.
Yeah. And he was like, okay.
He became
Yeah.
like the head. He retired as the #1 person in charge of Huntsville, Alabama's Space and Rocket Center.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. The guy was a Nazi war POW.
Yeah.
And he became not just the head of a program, but the head of an actual space facility inside the United States.
Right.
That's just mind-boggling to me.
And my guess is that, when they, so I believe that he and his team surrendered to the American forces in the end. But when that happened, from the first look at it, you're like, they're POWs, right? Prisoners of war. They surrendered, and they were. But then he must have, I can only imagine, like, going back in time, like, he must have sat with people who got to know him, who made the assessment that he has no ideological connection to the Nazi party, right? He was technically part of the party because he was German and he was there, and that's who funded him. So it was really a safe bet for America to be like, you know what, we're going to give you all the things you want, right? Somebody made the assessment of what's the motivation, and somebody was like, we're going to fund you. That's, the reward. You're going to, he was, I believe in the beginning, like, nobody knew he had been part of the Nazi party. So he was a big ego boost because he was known, like, he had a great reputation,
Yeah.
And he got to do all the things that he wanted to do. So I just find that fascinating. Like, some American government official back in the day, I mean, probably.
It was an army interrogator.
Right.
But
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
exactly
yeah.
why it happened. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip.
Nah, I fuck with that. I definitely want to watch this shit. What the fuck? Oh my god. This nigga hooking me on these videos, bro. I fuck with this shit. You feel me? I think I'm gonna be thinking about that shit. Like, what really motivates this motherfucker inside this area? Is it the reward? Is it the ideologies? Is it coercion? Is it the ego? I'm gonna definitely be thinking about this shit. No kizzy. Love you all. Catch my next video. Peace. The freak out.